And as the relief efforts ramp up for the Horn, some environmentalists say that human activity may be partly to blame for the extreme drought in Somalia. They say that greenhouse gas emissions are creating a harsher climate and more severe weather patterns worldwide. VOA's Rebecca Ward reports.
Seasonal drought is a part of life for millions of people living in Somalia.
It's a pastoralist society, so they are able to wander with their herds around to where the rains have fallen most recently and take advantage of new green growth.
But this is an extreme year for drought, the worst in decades, and there are few places where herds can pasture. John Watkin is with Conservation International's Critical Ecosystem Partnership Fund. He says the humanitarian crisis is exacerbated by instability in Somalia, but the severity of the drought can be attributed to wider environmental issues.
This is now the worst drought in 60 years and the worst famine in 20 years. This is because of a series of years where we've had a failure of the rains, either one or both rains each year. So that has resulted in there being no resilience whatsoever in the natural resource base. But these artifacts are of larger global trend, which is the significant deforestation all around the world, which means that we don't have the forests which secure the water.
Watkins says forests help conserve water when it does rain, playing a larger role in the water cycle that produces precipitation. In the past 10 years, Africa had a net loss of more than 30 million hectares of forest, according to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. Worldwide, it estimates a net loss of more than 5 million hectares of forest a year, mainly through the conversion of tropical forest to agriculture. Bob Winterbottom is the Director of Ecosystem Services at the World Resources Institute. He says it's important to note that what is done to ecosystems affects their function and ultimately affects people.
Drought is part of climate, which is part of natural systems as well that can be affected and are increasingly affected by people. The effects may be sort of long-term cumulative effects. As we know, the buildup of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere is a big driver of climate change and disruptions in rainfall patterns. So although you can't sort of point to the action of one particular person in the Horn of Africa and saying this brought on the drought, droughts have been there, but their frequency, their severity, that's changing in association with global climate change. And we know what some of those drivers are for global climate change, particularly the buildup of greenhouse gases. And what's behind that? Some of that is related to deforestation.
Winterbottom also points to other land management problems as contributing to the crisis, such as overgrazing and cutting trees for fuel. The famine demands immediate attention, but Winterbottom says in the longer term there needs to be better management of the natural resources.
So that we can build a base for sustainable development, so that when rains are restored, that they do the maximum amount of benefit for people as opposed to damage. If rains fall on soils that are unprotected, they contribute to erosion. If rains fall on fields that have been well cultivated using the latest conservation technologies and so on, then those rains can be captured and used more effectively to produce a good harvest.
Recently, the United Nations Security Council took up the issue of climate change and how it affects peace and security across the globe. Although no consensus was reached, John Watkin of Conservation International says it's an indication of the importance of environmental issues. He says the international community now needs to work on building up resilient natural resources, so even places like Somalia can have what he calls a green economy.
Given that it's a desert doesn't mean that it doesn't have a vast diversity of plants and a natural resource base, and build in values for the ecosystems that you talk about. So the river basins themselves, although they originate in the highlands of Ethiopia, their flows straight through to the coast. We need to maintain those intact from the ridge to the reef.
Somalia's humanitarian crisis is a top priority right now, but both Watkin and Winterbottom agree that Somalia's extreme drought is a symptom of a much larger environmental problem worldwide, and that deforestation, whether in the Congo Basin or South America's Amazon, affects weather patterns worldwide. They say environmental issues such as greenhouse gas emissions and deforestation need to be addressed by the international community so that future droughts and floods will not be as frequent, severe, or long-lasting. Rebecca Ward, VOA News.